The calf smelled like butter and burnt sugar, the kind of place people photographed before they tasted a bite. I sat at the end of the table in a simple blue linen dress, palms flat on the white cloth so my hands wouldn't shake. My daughter-in-law, Belle, leaned over her mimosa, jeweled earrings catching the light like tiny knives. "You're lucky we even include you even though you're useless," Belle said, smiling as if she'd paid me a compliment. I felt the words cut through the air and settle in my chest. Across from me, my son Asher adjusted his cufflinks and stared at his phone. He did not look up. He did not say my name. "Belle," I said softly, because softness is how I learned to survive. "That isn't necessary. It's honest," Belle replied, lifting one perfect shoulder. "You're always there, but you don't really contribute." My Aunt Marianne stirred her iced tea so long the ice clicked like teeth. She didn't meet my eyes. "Now, Belle only means we all have our roles," she murmured, as if she were smoothing a bed no one wanted to sleep in. The waiter slid plates around us, eggs Benedict folded like origami, toast stacked with architectural pride, and I could not taste any of it. I tasted old pennies and cheap coffee and all the times I said yes when no would have saved me. "Asher," I said, keeping my voice level. "Did you hear what she just said to me?" Asher blinked like someone waking in the wrong room. "Let's not make a scene, Mom," he said, voice low, eyes back on the screen. "This place is crowded. Not make a scene." I bit the inside of my cheek. My whole life had been the scene other people rehearsed on. Belle set down her glass and dabbed at her lips with a napkin she didn't need. "We're just being practical, Dorothy. It's not like you helped with the wedding or the down payment or Belle," Asher warned gently, but there was no warmth in it. It was the meeting room voice he used on clients, not the boy I raised on coupons and clearance aisles. I reached for my cup and let the heat of the coffee ground me. Outside the window, tourists drifted down the sidewalk, taking photos of the chalkboard menu like this calf was a landmark. Maybe it was, in a way. Maybe it would mark where I stopped pretending. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I said, and my voice sounded like the hospital floors I walked for years, clean, steady, hard. "But I'm not useless." Belle laughed, not loud, just certain. "Then list what you've contributed this year, Dorothy. Go ahead. We'll wait." The table went quiet. Forks paused. The waiter hovered, then fled. I could have listed 100 things, but all of them were invisible. Signing for airline tickets, because Marianne couldn't figure out her card. Paying the deposit when Asher's bonus took longer to clear. Quietly calling the bank when Belle overdrafted the joint account and didn't want her parents to know. The things I'd done didn't make for pretty speeches. They were the kind of help done in the corner, at a kitchen table at midnight, with a calculator that never judged me. "I don't owe you an itemized report," I said, laying my napkin flat with careful hands. "And you don't get to decide my worth." Belle tilted her head, eyes bright with victory. "Oh, we're not deciding. We're observing." Marianne finally looked at me, mouth thin as thread. "Let's keep peace, Dorothy. You know how sensitive you can be." Sensitive. That old tired word they kept in their purse like a spare key. I turned to Asher. "Son, is this how you feel?" He swallowed. His jaw worked. "I just want everyone to get along," he said. The words were so smooth they slid right off the table and onto the floor. Belle reached for his hand and intertwined their fingers like proof. "We include you, Dorothy. That should be enough." A bell over the door chimed. Somewhere behind me a cappuccino hissed. The caffee's light bounced on the silverware, and I saw my reflection in a spoon, small, bent, distorted, and suddenly I understood. This was the picture they preferred. Me warped to fit their frame. "I appreciate the invitation," I said. I kept my voice even, because calm can be sharper than shouting. "But respect isn't optional." Belle's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then earn it." I felt my heart slow, like a machine winding down to reveal what mattered. Years of hospital logistics, vendor contracts, and tight budgets had trained me for one thing. When systems fail, you don't argue with them. You redesign them. I set my cup down. I folded my napkin once, then again, the way I used to fold Asher's school notes after I'd signed them. "I won't argue with you," I said. "Good," Belle replied, satisfied, as if she had won something important. "I'll adjust," I added. Asher glanced up, uneasy. "Adjust what?" "My role," I said, standing. My chair legs didn't scrape. I lifted them. "I have always known how not to leave marks. You won't have to worry about me being useless anymore." Belle lifted her glass again, but her fingers trembled just enough to ring the crystal. "Finally, something sensible." I looked at my son, at the boy who used to bring me dandelions from the ditch as if they were roses. Finish your brunch, Asher, I said. Enjoy it, Mom, he began. I placed my tip beneath the saucer and walked toward the door, past the chalkboard and the tourists and the ringing bell. The street light outside threw my shadow long across the sidewalk. I stepped into it and felt taller. That brunch was the last time I sat quietly at their table. The next time we gathered, I would bring something other than appetite, and when I did, they would finally taste it. I didn't walk far after brunch, just 2 blocks to the public library where the air smelled of paper and quiet. I sat in the same corner chair I had once occupied when Asher was 10, building Lego castles at my feet while I paid bills with a stub pencil. The memory pressed against me like an old bruise. People thought insults hurt the most. They didn't. It was the remembering the tally of every sacrifice that kept me awake at night. I built my life in Houston, not because I loved it, but because it was the one place that gave me steady work after the divorce. Purchasing coordinator at Memorial Hospital. It wasn't glamorous, but I knew the numbers like they were my own bones. Contracts, invoices, vendor negotiations. I could balance a budget on scraps of paper while stirring spaghetti with my free hand. Raising Asher alone meant no vacations, no lazy weekends. Every decision had to be calculated. Every bill paid on time, or the whole system fell apart. One night, I found Asher at the kitchen table, frowning at a credit card statement. He was barely 20, still trying to prove he was grown. It's just temporary, Mom, he said, sliding the paper toward me. His voice cracked the way it did when he lied. My bonus is coming. I'll pay it off. Just this once. I rubbed my temples. You said that last month, Asher, but this time's different, I swear. He gave me that boyish grin, the one that used to melt me when he was 5, and as always, I wrote the check. The pattern began there. Belle arrived a few years later, with her pastel jackets and diamond earrings that glittered even when they weren't real. She smiled at me sweetly at first. You've done so much for him, Dorothy. He's lucky to have you. But luck has an expiration date. Soon her request slipped between his. Could you co-sign the lease? We're short on time. The florist needs the deposit now, and Asher's check is delayed. You know how banks are with young couples. You understand. I always understood. Even my siblings leaned on me. My brother in New Orleans needed airline tickets when his card wouldn't swipe. Marianne, my aunt, called from Baton Rouge insisting she couldn't figure out her hotel booking. Dorothy, you're just so good with these things, she would say. And I handled it, because it was easier to fix problems than to argue about them. The problem was never the money. It was the invisibility. I remembered one Christmas when Asher was still in middle school. I stayed up until 2 a.m. sewing patches onto his coat so he wouldn't look poor in the schoolyard. He wore that coat for 3 more years. Not once did he know how many nights I traded sleep for his dignity. Now, at brunch, Belle had smirked at me across her glass and called me useless. I pressed my palms against the library table and whispered, if I disappeared tomorrow, would they even notice besides the unpaid bills? An older man across the aisle glanced up, puzzled, and I forced a tight smile, as if I had been rehearsing a line for a play. But inside, the words echoed like a stone dropped into a well. It was never about money. It was about erasure. I was the scaffolding behind their perfect house, invisible until it was gone, and as I sat there, staring at the rows of books, I realized something simple, almost terrifying. I had trained them to treat me this way. Every yes, every bailout, every whispered don't worry, I'll handle it had ridden me into the background, and if I had ridden myself into the background, then maybe I could write myself back into the story. I left the library as the sun lowered behind the Houston skyline, long shadows stretching over the sidewalks. The city hummed with traffic, horns, and ambition. But in my chest, something quieter began to hum back, not desperation this time, but defiance. They had built their castle on my foundation. And one day soon, I would show them what happens when the foundation stops holding steady. The memory of Belle's smirk at brunch chased me home like a shadow. But what burned even deeper was the flash of another day, the wedding. Their wedding. The day that should have felt like my son's new beginning but instead felt like my quiet erasure. It had been a warm spring in Houston. Magnolia blossoms were scattered along the sidewalks like confetti. I'd worn a pale lavender dress, not too bright, not too dull, chosen carefully so I wouldn't draw attention from Belle's family. The church was grand, white pillars stretching toward the sky, every pew wrapped in satin boughs. I arrived early, as I always did, thinking someone might need help. Instead, Belle's mother shooed me gently toward the back. "Dorothy, why don't you sit second row?" she said, smile fixed, as sharp. "The photos look more balanced that way." I blinked. "But I'm Asher's mother," she patted my arm as though I were fragile. "And I'm sure everyone knows that. This is just for the aesthetic, the aesthetic." My son's wedding, and I was a prop that didn't fit her backdrop. The rehearsal dinner the night before. I had offered to cover the flowers. "That's generous, Dorothy, but we've already chosen arrangements," Belle said sweetly. "My parents are taking care of it. They just have better taste for these things." "Of course," I murmured, folding my hands in my lap. But I'd felt the sting deep in my ribs when I suggested baking a groom's cake, the kind Asher loved as a boy, chocolate layered with strawberries. Belle tilted her head. "That's sweet, but we want something elegant." "Don't worry about it. Just enjoy yourself." "Enjoy myself." As if my place was to smile silently in the corner while strangers staged the most important day of my son's life. On the wedding day, I sat where they told me, second row, behind Belle's aunt, with the enormous hat that blocked my view. I could barely see my son's face as he waited at the altar. During the vows, Belle looked radiant. Asher looked rehearsed. He smiled the same smooth smile he used at brunch when deals needed closing. When the photographer called families forward for pictures, I rose, clutching my clutch like an anchor. "Actually, let's just get the bridal family first," Belle said, touching my elbow as though guiding me back. "We'll include you later." "Don't worry." Later never came. At the reception, I lingered by the dessert table, sipping champagne that tasted like vinegar. Marianne laughed with Belle's cousins as though she had belonged there all along. I tried to join one conversation, but Belle's voice floated over my shoulder. "Dorothy doesn't really get these things. She's more practical. Numbers and bills, you know." The group chuckled politely, eyes sliding away from me. Numbers and bills. That was my category, my label. Not mother, not host, not family, just the quiet woman with her calculator. Toward the end of the night, Asher finally found me. His tie was loosened, his cheeks flushed from dancing. "Mom, are you having fun?" he asked, as if he hadn't noticed me push to the edges all day. I pressed a smile onto my lips. "Of course, Asher. You look handsome." He kissed my cheek, quick, distracted. "Thanks for being here. It means a lot." Did it? If it had meant a lot, would I have been hidden behind hats and aesthetics? I swallowed the lump in my throat. "Always, son. I'll always be here." But even then, a voice inside whispered, "Not like this." Now, years later, sitting in that cafe while Belle smirked at me, I realized the brunch insult was not a first strike. It was only the latest reminder. They had erased me from his beginning. They had erased me from his wedding day. And if I wasn't careful, they would erase me from his future too. I rose from my chair at home that evening, pulling an old showbox from the closet. Inside were the folded receipts, the bank slips, the check duplicates, evidence of everything I had poured into Asher's life. I traced the ink with my finger. Each line was a choice, each number a sacrifice. Belle wanted me useless. Asher wanted me silent. But this paper told another story, one I had never spoken aloud. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to change the ending. I kept that showbox on my kitchen table for a week, unopened but heavy as a stone. Every time I passed it, I felt Belle's words echoing. "You're lucky we even include you, even though you're useless. But useless women don't hold proof." And I had plenty. One evening, after a long day at the hospital, I finally lifted the lid. The receipts smelled faintly of ink and dust. Bank slips curled like brittle leaves. Each one told a story they wanted to forget. I spread them across the table in neat rows, my old coordinator's mind slipping back into order. 1,200 for Asher's apartment deposit, 350 to cover Belle's temporary overdraft, 200 wedding-related emergency, hotel charges for Marianne, airline tickets for my brother. Every number had once felt like love. Now they looked like chains. I remembered the night Belle called me at nearly midnight. "Dorothy, I hate to bother you," she had said, her voice syrupy sweet. "But Asher's card got flagged again. Could you just cover the florist deposit? We'll pay you right back." Asher's muffled voice drifted in the background. "Just this once, Mom. Promise." I sighed that night and wrote the check. Now, seeing the slip in my hands, I whispered to the empty room, just this once. Again and again. The next day at work, I caught myself staring at a stack of contracts, the hospital's vendors haggling for better rates. My pen hovered. I realized I had been using the same skills at home for decades, solving problems, balancing deficits, smoothing rough edges, but without respect or recognition. The hospital wouldn't run without me. Neither would my family. Yet one world paid me in steady wages, the other in insults. The first seed of defiance sprouted when Marianne called, as she often did. "Dorothy, I'm stuck again," she said, frustration buzzing through the line. "These hotel websites are impossible. Could you just book it for me and put it on your card? I'll send you cash later." Normally, I would have sighed, logged in, and fixed it. Instead, I drew in a breath. "I'm afraid I can't this time, Marianne. You'll have to call the hotel directly. They'll walk you through it." A pause. Then sharpness. "Dorothy, don't be difficult. You're good at this stuff. Just do it." My hand shook, but my voice stayed calm. "No, you can figure it out." The silence on the line was thick, offended. Finally, she snapped. "Well, if you want to be petty, I want to be free," I whispered, before hanging up. It wasn't dramatic. Not yet. But the absence of my help landed like a stone. In still water. 2 days later, Asher called. His tone was tight, rushed. "Mom, Belle's credit card got declined at the boutique. It's just a mistake, but we need to cover it before they cancel the order. Could you know Asher?" He stopped. "What?" I steadied my breath. "No, you and Belle will need to handle it yourselves." In the background, Belle's voice rose, sharp as glass. "She's always been bitter. I told you she'd pull this." Asher lowered his voice. "Mom, please, just help us one last time." I closed my eyes, saw the showbox in my mind. "No, son, I've done my last time." And I hung up. That night, I sat alone at my kitchen table, the city's hum drifting through the window. I felt both lighter and terrified. Saying no felt unnatural, like stepping onto a bridge I wasn't sure would hold. But the next morning, I woke with a strange calm. My shoulders ached less. My chest felt easier. For the first time in years, I'd given myself permission not to be their safety net. I gathered the receipts into a single folder, neat and ordered. Not to show them yet, no, not yet. But because I knew one day, the proof would matter. Belle wanted to call me useless? Let her. When the right moment came, she would see just how useful I had been, and how dangerous it was to mistake silence for weakness. When you spend your whole life saying yes, the first no echoes. It rattles through the cracks you never noticed before. I could feel those cracks spreading now. Not in me, but in them. The calls started coming faster. First Asher. His voice was pinched, a salesman's calm barely holding. "Mom, the electric bill slipped through. Just a small oversight. Could you?" I pressed the phone closer to my ear. "No, Asher. You'll need to manage it yourselves." Silence stretched. Then a muttered curse, muffled by his hand over the receiver. Belle's voice pierced faintly in the background. "I told you she was going to turn on us." I could picture the two of them standing in their glossy kitchen. Belle's arms crossed, Asher's jaw tight. For once, their storm didn't pull me in. A week later, Marianne appeared at my door with a forced smile and a broken suitcase wheel. "Dorothy, sweetheart, could I just borrow your card for a quick hotel booking? My bank's systems are down, and I don't have time to argue with them." I held the doorframe steady. "No, Marianne, you'll need to sort it out yourself." Her smile dropped. "Honestly, Dorothy, you're being dramatic. We're family." "Exactly," I said. "And family shouldn't treat me like their secretary," she huffed, dragging her broken suitcase back down the steps. I watched her leave, my heart hammering but my spine straighter than it had been in years. By the second week, the cracks were visible even in public. I ran into one of Belle's friends, a neighbor from her yoga class, at the grocery store. She leaned toward me, voice low. "Is everything all right with Asher and Belle?" She mentioned finances. I smiled gently, sliding a bag of flour into my cart. "I wouldn't know. I don't handle their problems anymore." The woman blinked, surprised at my calm, and in that moment, I realized gossip could do more work than I ever had. One night, I sat at my kitchen table with the folder of receipts open, arranging them chronologically, every check, every wire, every overdraft I had patched. I imagined sliding them across the brunch table like playing cards, one by one. 1,200 for your apartment, Asher. Remember that? 2,000 for the florist, Belle. You swore you'd pay it back. Countless. smaller sums, each one. Proof I wasn't useless, I was the foundation. And they had built their castle on me while calling me worthless. The first test came at another family dinner, this time at Belle's parents' house. The table was long, polished, every plate perfectly aligned. Belle wore pearls that glinted. With every laugh, halfway through, she began again. Dorothy doesn't really understand investments, but it's fine. Some people just aren't built for it. The table chuckled softly. I cut a piece of roast chicken, steady. Maybe not, but I understand debt. The laughter faltered. Asher's fork clinked against his plate. Belle flushed, though she masked it with a sip of wine. Marianne cleared her throat. Dorothy, there's no need to sound so harsh. I smiled. I'm not being harsh. I'm being accurate. The room shifted, uncomfortable. Belle's mother quickly changed the subject, but I caught Belle's glance sharp, unsettled. For the first time, she looked less certain of her throne. When I left that night, I stood on the porch longer than necessary, breathing the cool air. For years, I had been the silent backdrop, but now, my silence had edges. It carried weight. They could mock me. They could erase me in their stories, but I was no longer bending. That night, I slid the folder of receipts into my purse. I wasn't ready to reveal them yet, but soon, I would not just say no, I would show them what my uselessness really looked like when it walked out of their lives and left them to face the bills they'd buried. The folder sat in my purse like a loaded gun. I carried it everywhere, to the grocery store, to work, even to Sunday service. No one knew. Not Asher, not Belle, not Marianne. But I knew, and that knowledge gave me a strange, steady power. At work, I found myself staring at spreadsheets with new eyes. Vendors argued over pennies, but I no longer felt drained. I thought, this is exactly what I've done my whole life: balanced the chaos of others, kept the lights on, made order out of disorder. Only now, I wasn't balancing for them. I was preparing for myself. The calls had slowed after I said no. The last few times, but tension was thick whenever Asher spoke to me. One afternoon, he stopped by unexpectedly. He stood awkwardly in my kitchen, hands shoved in his pockets like he was still 12 years old, asking for permission to go to a party. Mom, Belle thinks you're being unfair, he began. I set down my teacup. Unfair how? You've always helped before. She doesn't understand why you've suddenly changed. I raised an eyebrow. Maybe because I've realized I'm not just a checkbook. His jaw tightened. Belle feels like you're punishing us. I looked him dead in the eye. If you think responsibility is punishment, Asher, then maybe you've never really carried it. He shifted uncomfortably, gaze sliding away. For once, he had no rehearsed line. That night, I sat at my table and spread the receipts again. I arranged them in columns: housing, weddings, emergencies, miscellaneous rescues. It was a life's worth of proof that I wasn't useless, and more than that, it was proof of their dependency. I imagined Belle's face when I laid them out, one by one. Here's your overdraft, Belle. Remember how you promised it was just once? Here's your florist deposit, Asher, the one your bonus never covered. Here's Marianne's hotel. When she couldn't figure out the website, the image fueled me. A week later, Marianne hosted another family dinner. I almost didn't go, but some instinct told me I needed to. The room was bright, filled with laughter, Belle's voice carrying above the rest like polished brass. Halfway through, she glanced at me with that smirk again. Dorothy, I suppose you wouldn't understand our new investment portfolio. It's complicated. The table chuckled obediently. I set down my fork. Maybe not, but I do understand how fast portfolios collapse when debts pile higher than assets. The laughter thinned, uncertain. Belle's smile faltered, then returned, forced. Well, we're not in debt. We're fine. Of course, I said smoothly, though inside, I felt the receipts burning in my purse like matches. After dinner, Marianne caught me alone in the hallway. Dorothy, why are you so sharp these days? You used to be easier. I held her gaze. Easier for you, maybe. Not for me. Her lips pursed. This attitude won't make anyone include you more. I'm not looking to be included, Marianne. I'm looking to be respected. She had no answer for that. Back home, I placed the folder in the center of my kitchen table, staring at it as if it were alive. This wasn't just paper. It was leverage. It was the scaffolding they had built their pride on, and the wrecking ball that could take it down. For years, I thought silence was peace. I thought invisibility was safety. But now I understood. Silence was their weapon, not mine. And the longer I stayed quiet, the louder their lies grew. I closed the folder and whispered into the empty room. Not much longer. Next time, I won't just say no, I'll show them what no looks like. The storm was gathering, not outside in the Houston sky, but inside me, and when it broke, they wouldn't be ready for the thunder. The cafe looked the same as before: chalkboard menus, tourists snapping photos, waiters balancing plates like circus performers. But this time, I didn't come to blend in. I wore a dark green dress, simple but sharp. My hair was pinned back neatly, my lipstick a shade too bold for Belle's taste. In my purse sat the folder. It felt heavier than any Bible I'd ever carried. When I walked in, Belle's laugh floated across the room. She sat at the same table as last time, her pastel jacket pressed perfectly, her mimosa already sweating on the linen. Asher sat beside her, cufflinks gleaming, eyes scanning his phone. Marianne was there too, stirring her iced tea like always. "Dorothy, you made it," Belle said, her voice coated in sugar. "We weren't sure if you'd feel up to joining us again." I smiled as I sat down. I wouldn't miss it. The waiter poured my coffee. I let the bitter scent rise between us before I spoke. "You know, Belle, I've been thinking about what you said last time. That I'm lucky you include me. That I'm useless." Her lips curved. "Oh, Dorothy, don't take it so literally. We were joking. You're just not exactly involved." Asher shifted uncomfortably. "Mom, maybe let's not." I raised a hand. "No, Asher, it's time we do." I placed the folder on the table. The sound of it landing cut through the chatter around us. Belle's eyes flicked to it, cautious. "What's this?" she asked. I opened it slowly, like turning the pages of scripture. One by one, I slid the receipts across the white cloth. 1200 for your first apartment deposit, Asher. "Remember that? 350 to cover your overdraft, Belle. You swore it was just once. 2000 for the florist when your bonus didn't arrive, Asher. Hotel bills for Marianne. Airline tickets for my brother. A dozen small rescues nobody ever remembered." The paper fanned across the table like playing cards in a gambler's hand. Belle's cheeks flushed crimson. "This is inappropriate, Dorothy. You're making a scene." I met her gaze. "No, Belle. You made the scene when you called me useless. I'm simply changing the script." Asher leaned forward, whispering fiercely. "Mom, put that away. People are watching." "Good," I said. My voice didn't rise, but it carried. "Let them watch. For years, I carried this family. I covered your bills. I kept your lights on. I made sure you could sit in restaurants like this and look important. And how did you repay me? By calling me worthless. By erasing me from photos, from stories, from respect." Marianne's spoon clattered against her glass. "Dorothy, lower your voice. Don't embarrass yourself." I turned to her. "No, Marianne. Don't you mean don't embarrass you? You nodded when Belle insulted me. You've used me just the same." I'm done being quiet. The cafe had grown hushed. Waiters slowed their steps. At the next table, a man paused mid-bite, eyes on us. Belle grabbed one of the receipts, crumpling it in her hand. "This proves nothing. Families help each other. That's what you chose to do. Don't twist it." I leaned forward. "Families help, yes, but they also respect. They also remember. Not once did you thank me. Not once did you acknowledge the weight I carried. Instead, you smirked across your glass and called me useless. Tell me, Belle, who's useless now that I've stopped paying your debts?" Her hand shook, the crumpled slip trembling. Asher finally spoke, his voice breaking. "Mom, please. You're humiliating us." "No, Asher," I said gently. "I'm revealing the truth. There's a difference." For a heartbeat, I almost saw the boy he used to be, the child who brought me dandelions from the yard, who once thought I was the strongest person in the world. But then he looked at Belle, at the pearls around her neck, and his jaw hardened. Belle pushed back her chair, standing abruptly. "Come on, Asher. We don't have to sit here and take this." She stormed toward the door, heels striking sharp against the tile. Asher hesitated, glancing at me once, just once, before trailing after her. Marianne followed, muttering something about dramatics, and suddenly, the table was mine. I gathered the receipts calmly, sliding them back into the folder. Around me, whispers buzzed. One waiter caught my eye and gave the smallest nod, like he understood more than he said. For the first time in years, I breathed without weight in my chest. My silence had ended. My voice had landed. They had called me useless, but the truth was loud now, echoing through every corner of that cafe. The cafe's door closed behind them with a sharp chime, and just like that, I was alone at the table. The folder sat in front of me, its edges worn, the truth folded neatly inside. For years, I had carried that truth in silence, but silence had never protected me. Speaking it aloud had felt like breaking chains. I finished my coffee slowly. No one rushed me, no one interrupted. For once, I wasn't the backdrop to their performance, I was the one left standing on the stage. When I finally rose, I slipped the folder back into my purse, leaving a generous tip under my saucer. The waiter caught my eye again and gave a quiet nod. I nodded back. Respect from strangers had felt warmer than any hollow courtesy from my own blood. At home, I set the folder on a shelf and closed the door on it. I no longer needed to clutch it like a weapon. I had used it, and it had done its work. The power wasn't in the papers anymore. It was in me. That night, my phone rang 3 times. Asher. I let it go to voicemail. His voice trembled in the message. Mom, Belle's upset. You embarrassed us. Can we talk? The second message was shorter, angrier. You didn't have to do that. That was cruel. The third was barely a whisper. I don't know what to say. I sat by the window, listening to the hum of the city. For once, I didn't feel the pull. To fix, to smooth, to make right. I let the phone stay dark. In the weeks that followed, I began to live differently. I booked a trip. My first real vacation in decades. Savannah in the spring, where the air smelled of jasmine and the streets curved with history. I walked through squares shaded by oak trees, ate peach cobbler without glancing at the price, and laughed out loud in a way I hadn't since Asher was a boy. I signed up for a painting class at the community center. My brushstrokes were clumsy, my lines uneven, but each color I laid on canvas felt like reclaiming something I had lost, pieces of myself that had been buried under bills and obligations. Marianne tried calling once too. Dorothy, I need help with, she began. I cut her off gently. I can't, Marianne. You'll have to manage it yourself. Her sharp intake of breath told me she understood. I was no longer the family's safety net, and I was not sorry. One Sunday, I ran into Belle at the grocery store. She avoided my eyes, clutching her cart like a shield. I could see the tension in her jaw, the fury simmering just below her polite smile. Dorothy, she said stiffly, we'd prefer if you didn't air private matters in public again. I smiled, calm as the tide. Then perhaps don't insult me in public again. It works both ways. She flushed, spinning her cart away without another word. Watching her retreat, I felt no guilt, only relief. At tea night, I often sat with a cup of tea reflecting on everything. For years, I had thought my worth was tied to what I could provide, the checks I wrote, the problems I solved. But worth isn't measured in dollars or favors. It's measured in dignity. And dignity is not given by others. It's claimed by yourself. Belle had called me useless. My own son had let the insult hang in the air. Marianne had nodded in agreement, but I had answered them, not with shouting, not with violence, but with truth. And the truth was this: I was never useless. I was the foundation they stood on. And when I stepped away, their castle trembled. I took one last sip of tea, set the cup down, and whispered to myself softly, but with certainty, they called me useless. But without me, they were nothing. And for the first time in years, I felt whole.